All right, back out at Leo Carrillo on another overcast day, but it's beautiful, it's nice and warm, and we're here with Araya, and we're thinking of making something of the scene behind me. I'm thinking of focusing on the color around the rock right here. Araya, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna paint the rock in the foreground.
In other words, this bit of land here.
Yeah, that we're standing on. I'm gonna try to kind of focus more in this area here on the whitewater. And it's gonna be my focus, the swirling of the whitewater coming around that rock. I'm
painting on a 16 by 20 inch panel, and I've got my usual palette of colors, although I've squeezed out a bunch of colors. Some nice reds here that Araya gave me that I can't remember the names of. And then I've got a variety of blue greens here left over from my last painting. So you're painting on a 12 by 24?
Correct, 12 by 24.
All right, there we go.
Just gesso with acrylic gesso.
All right, sketching with burnt sienna. And I think I am gonna include the rocks in the foreground. Actually, I don't like that shape, but just as a starting point. And then these rocks will go out like this, something like that. And then I'm not gonna have a horizon. I think that I'll just lighten the value in the distance here to suggest fog. Something like that, although I don't know, this seems a little low now. I might have it up a little bit higher, maybe like this, and then try to have some interesting things going on in the water right there. That's just a quick sketch to show you guys the basic idea. All right, so it looks like you toned your panel with sort of a light gray color, is that right?
Yeah, I just put some burnt sienna and like little dots of ultramarine and just spread it around with paint thinner.
All right, I've added some ultramarine blue to my burnt sienna mix. My initial sketch with the burnt sienna is sort of exploratory, and now I'm trying to decide what I want my final shapes to be, so I've darkened up the paint a bit. And I like how the rocks kind of go out at an angle. I do like having the rocks in the foreground, and then there'll be some sort of big wave activity right in here, like in this area, and then also some white water and color out around these rocks as well. For the rocks in the foreground, I'm starting with a mix of yellow ochre, burnt sienna, titanium white, and I've thinned it a bit with odorless mineral spirits, and I'm using a number 8 natural bristle flat. I decided to go with a mid-tone value for these rocks. I'm keeping the mix warm and thin, as I mentioned, transparent. This is a new number 8 brush, so the bristles are really long, so I can cover a lot of area quickly. I'm gonna really focus on breaking down the scene into simple shapes. I know that's something I talk about a lot, but when painting a seascape, it is really difficult because there's just so many minute changes in the water. But I think having a more defined color and value pattern in the water makes for a better painting. I've added a bit more ultramarine to the mix and a little bit of alizarin crimson. I'm trying to get a little bit more red into these rocks. I'm debating on whether to open this area up here. In other words, have the water come through like this. And I think I might experiment with that. I don't want to draw the eye in this direction, but if I keep the value of the water dark over here, it will not be that noticeable. Use my paper towel to wipe away a little bit of the paint. There's an area right in here where when the waves break, water settles in this spot, so I think I might try to include that. All right, I've got a mixture here of Viridian, dioxazine purple, and titanium white. There's a dark portion of water here. It's actually the base of a breaking wave. Again, thinking of creating an interesting shape here. The water is dark over here as well. Something like this. Trying to be spontaneous with the paint application and almost mimic the motion of the water. I've got a mixture here of ultramarine blue, titanium white, and a little bit of burnt sienna. This is sort of my go-to gray mixture for seawater. And as I mentioned, I am going to lighten the value as I get towards the top here to create a feeling of depth, because there is quite a bit of fog in the distance. But I did want to establish an interesting line for the white water, so I did that. And then also there's a bit of dark in here as well. I've got a mixture here of cobalt teal, a little bit of viridian, and titanium white. So I am working from dark to light. I think I can lighten this a little bit. So I've added some titanium white, but I also added some Indian yellow. Indian yellow is a difficult color to work with for me. Indian yellow is a yellow, but it leans towards green. So when you look at it on your palette, you think, oh, it's yellow, and then you go to mix it with something and it's kind of green in color. Has that been your experience, Araya, with Indian yellow?
Yep, precisely.
He says yes. There's a breaking wave in here. I decided to use pure titanium white because I knew it would pick up some of the surrounding colors. Usually you mass in like crazy, but now you're actually being very thoughtful about your composition, man. I love that.
I just needed the yin and the yang between yesterday and today. We'll see what happens.
All right, I've got a mixture here of ultramarine blue and dioxazine purple. There's some areas at the base of the rocks where the water is sort of a purple color. So I want to add that, especially where there's submerged rocks, maybe like right here, maybe a hint of it here as well. Adding some gray to the rocks here to indicate some puddles. I think I made them too dark, so I added a little titanium white. And I've got pure titanium white again here. And I'm sure I'm going to pick up a little bit of the surrounding colors. Still using my number 8 natural bristle flat. This brush does allow me to get soft edges between the color transitions, which is really helpful when painting water. And the one last whitewater area is right in here. Once I paint these last bits of whitewater, the scrub in will be finished. Alright, so at this point the block in is done. I've stepped back about 10 or 15 feet just to look at the big shapes. And I do like the shapes. I'm going to need to darken the rocks, but I do not want to eliminate the orange color just because it plays so nicely against the blue greens. So that's going to be a challenge, but I am going to work from dark to light with thicker paint now. And Raya's starting to block in his shapes. Okay, I'm going to start reinforcing the darks, but I don't want to make them too dark. But without the darks, the lights will not stand out. Right here, I've got white water, so I do want this edge to be somewhat dark. By darkening it up, it makes the white water seem brighter. I've switched over to a number 6 natural bristle flat, and I'm adding some yellow ochre to the rocks, trying to preserve some of the burnt sienna from the scrub in. I've got a mixture of cadmium yellow medium and cadmium red. I mixed a color that approximates the scrub in. I got some transparent orange from Gamlin here. Adding a bit of saturation, but I'm trying not to break up the value pattern. All right, getting some color in there early. So helpful to get the saturated color in and then key the painting to those colors.
Yeah, especially if you have a lot of white water and a lot of varying versions of a similar color.
I'm seeing the different approach here.
All right.
I think the different approach is paying off by like really focusing on shapes. Like you got some interesting shapes going on.
Thank you.
Very cool. So at this point, I'm not going to do anything more to these rocks. I'm going to start focusing on the rocks down below. I think I'm going to tone down this orange color as well. In reality, it's more of a sand color. I'm doing my best to mix up a lot of paint and keep the brush loaded. And that does help with the paint application. If I'm using medium, I can thin the paint so it's very fluid. But since I'm not thinning the paint, if I want to get the paint to behave in a somewhat fluid fashion, I just need to use more of it. I've got a mixture here of yellow ochre, titanium white, and I've added a little bit of ultramarine blue to gray down the mix. I want to eliminate most of the orange scrub in, just because I don't want the foreground to compete with the rocks out here. I'd rather that the eye be drawn in this direction. So I'm going to try to have less saturation in the foreground. I'm still going to have little bits of the orange popping through. Hopefully. Got a mixture here of cobalt teal and cadmium yellow lemon. All right, so here's what I finished up with. We've been painting for about 2.5 hours. And so what I tried to do was build up the painting using thicker paint and varying levels of saturation to create interest, but also I was paying attention to the value structure, and I was careful not to break up the value structure and therefore compromise the composition. You're all done.
Hi, Surrender. Thanks for waiting for me.
Oh no, of course. Lots of saturation, good design too. Love that diagonal in there, the diagonal energy of the wave.
Thank you.
Yeah, get a close up on some of that texture. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think in the comments. If you'd like to see some extra videos and help support the channel, there's a Patreon link down below. I will also link Araya's Instagram down below as well, so check it out. Other than that, stay creative. I'll see you guys in the next video.